describe some of the most common kinds of data literacy competencies. I've seen these competencies across academic libraries, and they're designed to provide a framework for teaching data literacy skills in instruction and programming of all kinds. They're also a good way to measure success to see if what you're teaching is living up to your expectations. You're likely going to be familiar with these, so there's no need to go too much into detail on each of these competencies, but I want to provide a general overview of what we have now. So these competencies include data management, computational data analysis, including analyzing data with programs or languages like Python, R, SAS, and SPSS, data visualization using tools like Tableau, Microsoft Power BI, and even R, among other programs and languages. I feel like there's new data visualization technologies coming out all the time, but I might be a bit biased because that's the focus of my current role. There's also data sharing and publishing, sharing your data in a repository, securing a DOI. There's also data ethics, in which most competencies here focus on data ethics are going to be focusing more on copyright, intellectual property, and de-identification of sensitive data, such as medical data and personal identifiable information. And then finally, we have data storage and organization. So looking at these competencies, you might be wondering about why I proposed this session and why I want to talk about community and collaboration as data literacy competencies in the first place. Community and collaboration, they aren't exactly computational skills like Python or R or OpenRefine. Forming community and working with others is not an explicit requirement to do data analysis or to make a visualization. So why focus on it? Why advocate for this? Community and collaboration, they serve very important functions in data science. This is true in academia, research, and in the private sector. I think that a lot of the time when we're talking about tech, we have this sort of myth of the lone genius who creates an analysis or an app or a program all by themselves as a product of their own sort of genius and mind power. But the truth is that nothing occurs in isolation. And that by doing an analysis, making a visualization, you are fundamentally building upon the work of others. And in addition, learning from others is an important part of learning in the first place, right? This can happen informally in the workplace as one researcher asking questions of another. And it can also happen in the library setting, during a close-knit workshop, a seminar, collaborative project, or a consultation. Finding community is not limited by academic discipline. And in fact, one of the reasons why collaboration can be so important is because it draws together people from different disciplines. It allows data science practitioners to see the data practices of other researchers who may have identified more efficient or accurate ways to do things. In tandem with this is that collaboration and community encourage data science beyond traditional data scientist positions in the private sector. I want to be clear that I follow a definition of data science that is inclusive of disciplines such as digital history and digital humanities, which analyze data to answer humanities questions. And I think about, in the book Data Feminism by Lauren Klein and Catherine D'Ignazio, their definition of data science as basically being any sort of method or analysis that uses sort of systematic methods to analyze quantities of data or information, which is also inclusive, of digital humanities and digital history, as well as other sort of non-STEM versions of data science. And opening the door to collaboration also encourages it also encourages citizen science, enabling communities of people to make scientific discoveries that reach beyond traditional research centers and universities. Researchers can then also find and participate in data communities, which I would define as any community of people that works to analyze, visualize, preserve, and maintain data, as well as any group that provides data education or data advocacy. Finally, a solid education in data communities will also include how data functions in the local community. As an example, my library is based in Arlington, Texas, which is centered in Tarrant County. So someone who studies at my university who is following these competencies should ideally be able to understand civic data resources that come from both Arlington and Tarrant County, as well as understanding how data informs the decisions that are happening locally. Right here in our community, down to the university level. So to look at this further, I want to look at one way that these competencies can sort of come to fruition in an academic library setting. I'll be looking at an example from the library where I work, which is the UTA libraries. So currently, the Research Data Services Department at UTA is revising and updating our data literacy competencies. In reviewing our existing competencies, like looking over what we had already to see sort of where we could grow, I saw an opportunity to include community and collaboration as these competencies. And I worked with my supervisor, Peace Austin Williamson, to do this. So on the screen, you're going to see some of these competencies going from emerging learners to intermediate learners to advanced learners. You don't need to read all of this. I know that it's a lot of text. I included it so that participants can look over it again after the presentation if they're inclined, and that it can serve as a resource in that way, but please don't worry about observing all of this right now. What I think is important to note is that in designing these competencies, we made sure to emphasize that the mark of an advanced learner is their willingness to participate in communities and help others. I always think about the Toni Morrison quote. I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. Knowing how to do data analysis and more broadly, even work with technology, gives you a form of capital and a form of power. The mark of someone who is truly successful with data is someone who can use their knowledge to help others, to better their community, and to empower others. After implementing the competencies, there's then the question of how to accomplish the goals that these competencies set out with. We want students to become familiar with civic data. We want them to identify data communities, both on campus and off. We want them to get experience working with others and working with people who come from different fields and who have varying levels of familiarity with technology. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the concrete ways that we or another library could implement some of these competencies. So starting off with civic data, as I mentioned before, Arlington is situated in Tarrant County. It actually borders Fort Worth, and we're also a 30-minute drive from Dallas. This basically means that we have a lot of options when it comes to civic data. Some of our options include partnering with the cities of Fort Worth and Arlington to host guest lectures about civic data initiatives happening in their cities. I'm thinking particularly about, open data portals and other open data initiatives, as well as opportunities to learn about student internships or positions. We could also design a workshop or program about civic data, how to access and navigate open data portals and how to use local geospatial data. As a GIS librarian, it's kind of hard for me. I know that, one of the most common questions that I get is actually how to access historical geospatial data, by a basis of like land value or, census data. And there are resources out there, but they can be a bit confusing. So, I see an opportunity there to teach, workshops specifically about finding local geospatial data, both current and historical. We could also print out or purchase materials about civic data and have them available in our Center for Data-Driven Research, which is called the Data Cave. To your right, you're actually going to see a copy of a zine by the Detroit Community Technology Project, which is an organization in Detroit. I believe it's part of the Allied Media Projects, but it basically centers itself around teaching community technology in ways that are accessible, friendly, and sensitive. So I see an opportunity to include something similar to that in the Data Cave or in other, data-driven research centers to sort of emphasize, the community aspect of data and the civic aspect of data. Next are data communities. As I mentioned before, I consider data communities to be any groups that practice or provide support for education for data science. The goals here are a bit broader. We could encourage students to participate in local data communities. Obviously, this is complicated right now by COVID, but we could encourage students to participate in data communities virtually for now, and then in person when it becomes safe. This might include things like meetup groups, groups for Python and R, groups that are committed to using data for social justice and advocacy. There's also fostering interdisciplinary collaboration, perhaps through providing a virtual corkboard where students and faculty can advertise that they're looking for help or that they want to help with research projects. Finally, our department is currently planning for a summer data fellowship to take place next summer, which is going to be a paid opportunity bringing together undergraduate students, faculty, data librarians, and statisticians to develop a research project over the course of the summer. Ideally, this will look like a student who has a research question, an undergraduate student who has a research question applying to this program to then receive, first off, like a stipend for doing this work, as well as receiving hands-on help from data librarians, from faculty, from statisticians for help with their data-driven research. Finally, we have collaboration. An example of a way that my department has successfully organized collaborative events is the Open Data Day Hackathon. This is an annual event in which students work in teams to use open data to develop apps that are, created for the public good. It's a great experiential learning opportunity, especially because, teams are sometimes formed at the hackathon itself, and students from all majors and skill types come to participate. It's worth noting that this past March at our most recent hackathon, one of the winners of the hackathon was actually somebody who had no prior coding experience and just showed up to see what it was all about. It's very important to also note that the groups that are most successful here are, groups of students who have different types of skills, who have skills with research and with computation. It's not all just coding. There's a lot more that goes into it. And then finally, we have the goal of creating a network for researchers, students, and faculty to identify collaborators, which is related to, the corkboard idea in the last slide. But, basically, providing spaces for students to, work together, learn together, and sort of develop these collaborations that feel very natural. So thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate the opportunity to present here and also to learn from everybody else. This has been really great, and this is the end of the presentation, so I can open it up to questions now.
Thank you so much, Isaac. All right, so we do have a small discussion in the chat just about, Doreen said, workshops concerning COVID, incorporating public health data and medical research data would be great, which I agree. And we do have 2 questions in the Q&A. So Jennifer asks, Isaac, is the data cave a library space?
Yes, so the data cave is actually, it's a space in the basement of our central library at UTA. It has a bunch of computers that are sort of high powered and that have specific software that enables them to do data analysis. It's also a teaching space. That's where we hold most of our workshops, or at least where we held them pre-COVID. But yeah, it's a library space and it's funded by the library.
Alrighty, thank you. And I have a second question from an anonymous attendee, which is kind of funny that the Q&A box puts it in like that. Do you have specific recommendations for fostering interdisciplinary collaboration? So any particular infrastructure, etc.?
Yeah, so I think that, one way that we're trying to do this is through the Summer Data Fellowship, which is intentionally open to people from a variety of disciplines. I know that just in my work as a librarian at UTA, I've worked with faculty who are doing work with digital humanities and who are doing work that crosses disciplines. So being able to tie them into the Summer Data Fellowship helps, just as having that network. But I think that creating this sort of structured space where people can come and get help with their data regardless of their discipline helps. I think sometimes people from non-STEM disciplines can feel a little bit intimidated or nervous about coming to spaces like this, maybe thinking that they don't have the skills required or that they don't measure up in some way. So I think having some kind of structured environment is good for that.
Alrighty, and I have another question from Chantel. So did you say that the hackathon included making apps? Do you teach that skill in the hackathon? That's so cool.
So, you know, we've had workshops during the course of the hackathon before, you know, workshops on things like Git. During the last iteration, which was last March, we didn't have any of those separate workshops. So we really relied on, you know, some of the students coming already had programming skills. I wouldn't say that they were all necessarily advanced. I think that a lot of the people who came, you know, had sort of like beginner or intermediate skills with programming and definitely learned more while they were there making the apps just to, you know, come up with code that would fit exactly what they wanted to do. Um, but yeah, they created apps that basically, you know, they. I'm trying to think, but the first place winner of our competition actually made a COVID tracking app um, using open data. So basically, you know, any kind of app that was made for the public good. Um, but people also came to the hackathon, you know, with skills in design or skills with social research, or even just background knowledge of, you know, current events, anything that would help to sort of inform the apps. Because I think, you know, if you come to the events just with computational knowledge and you don't necessarily have a broader context for doing the research, your app is only going to go so far.
Alrighty, and I have, I think, three more questions for right now. Two of them in the Q&A and one of them is in the chat. So I do see that, Kalila. So another anonymous attendee says, thank you for your insights, probably the same anonymous from before. Can you share any more about the Summer Data Fellowship? So what skills will you teach or what projects will the students work on?
Yeah, so the skills that we teach are going to be dependent on what the students want to learn. We are considering right now having two forms of instruction for the Summer Data Fellowship, you know, both having workshops with all attendees as well as individual consultations with attendees or with participants. You know, so I'm thinking that some of those skills that we might teach would include things like Python, R, as well as GIS, you know, geospatial mapping techniques, and things like that. The projects that the students work on are going to come from the ideas that they already have. So basically a student, when they're applying to the program, would propose a research project, or they would open up with some kind of question that they have that they want to explore further. And we would help to sort of guide them on that.
Thank you. Alrighty, and moving to the one question that's in the chat. So Kalila asks, are you also working with civic data and partnerships with local government and nonprofits? I'm thinking of the kind of work done by the Civic Switchboard.
Not currently, although that is something I would be very interested in. I'm also a fan of Civic Switchboard. So that is something that we're looking into doing and that I would be very interested in doing as well.
Alrighty, and then I have one final question, at least for right now. So Jen asks, do you engage with local communities, not just local data? So kind of a continuation of that last question.
Yeah, so I know that the library as a whole works with local communities. I know that the library as a whole, you know, we have special education initiatives and partnerships with K through 12 schools in the Arlington area. The research data services team itself does not already have those partnerships, although that's something that we might be interested in the future.